Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of OpsCast, hosted by Catchpoint. My name is Craig Lowell, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. Today's presentation will cover the importance of digital experience monitoring, the role that alerting plays in this process, and how companies like Overstock are taking advantage of innovative tools offered by both Catchpoint and OpsGenie. Your hosts today are going to be Mehdi Dowdy, CEO and co-founder of Catchpoint, Burke High, the CEO and co-founder of OpsGenie, and Darren Lord, database administrator at Overstock. After the formal presentation, all three panelists will remain online to answer your questions. So if you do have one during the talk, please type it into the questions window on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll get to as many as we can during the Q&A portion. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn things over to Mehdi Dowdy of Catchpoint.
Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you, obviously, to both Overstock and OpsGenie for hopefully bringing some great lessons that everybody can use. So, obviously, I will start by saying that failure happens to the biggest, to the best out there. I could have replaced this slide with Amazon when their outage last week, and I think the message will be still clear. It can happen to anyone. Nobody's immune to failures. And it's really about what you do when the failure happens that is the most important thing. I found myself last week when S3 had the problem, locked out of our office because the card system we used to get in our offices was somehow hosted on S3. Our salespeople could not do their work because some functions in Salesforce was not working properly, and our dual-factor authentication system was not working. So literally for 5 hours we were completely locked out, physically and logically. So what happens is how you deal with these problems. So the key thing to keep in mind is there is a customer expectation that keeps escalating. People demand faster services, faster websites, faster mobile services, etc., etc. And that's not going to go away. As I mentioned, when the S3 failure happened, what we discovered is the bottom of the iceberg. All these things that we didn't know were causing a potential outage on some of our day-to-day services. On a website perspective, you have things like DNS, latency, ads, routers, third-party DNS providers. All these things that you have no visibility into can have an impact on your digital user experience. One of the key messages when talking to various customers of ours, but also just experts in the industry, is this desire to switch from firefighting to fire prevention. I think the days of just getting on calls at 3 o'clock in the morning is really getting a little bit tiring. So we need to move away from this firefighting culture, waiting for the next crisis to happen, to fire prevention. And in order to do fire prevention, well, it's all about telemetry. It's all about putting the right smoke detectors in the right spots, the right cameras, and knowing where there is a fire in the building. Another objective is alert fatigue. I think that all the monitoring companies, including Catchpoint, need to do a better job, and we need to keep innovating in dealing with alerts. How do we send alerts? How many of them do we send? How do we reduce the false positives or even the false negatives, because that's another thing that people don't talk too much about, is the false negatives, the not knowing that you're having a problem. But reducing the amount of alerts is critical for the focus of for the people dealing with these alerts. So this is an interesting stat we found a few months ago. In general, IT groups spend about 46 hours per month in some war room troubleshooting problems. And I think, you know, with the SRE, with the DevOps culture that has emerged over the last few years, the goal was to reduce this amount of time spent in war rooms, but I don't think we're there yet. At least that's what I'm told. And so shifting from this culture of waiting for a crisis to happen to fire prevention is not going to be an easy thing. And it starts with many groups and many departments being involved on the day-to-day process here. So the first step is better monitoring and better escalation. That's critical. And what I mean by better monitoring is, what are you monitoring? What are we supposed to monitor? Having a good monitoring strategy is paramount. For example, with this S3 issue that happened last week, what I saw is a lot of folks were monitoring their CDN or their version of their website that is behind the CDN, but they were not monitoring the origin. So when the S3 outage happened, they were left in the dark, not knowing if it was the CDN having an issue, or multiple CDNs in some cases, or was it the origin? So monitoring is not about the tool, it's about what are you monitoring, what's your monitoring strategy. The other thing is, sending an email to a distribution list is no longer something that is acceptable. How do you know who's working on what? And believe it or not, it's still happening in many organizations. So better monitoring is critical. Another thing that we always talk to customers about is you have to separate availability monitoring from performance monitoring because they require either a different set of tool sets, a different set of escalations, a different set of awareness. Customers deal differently with an availability problem than they deal with a performance issue on the website. So making sure that you separate those two is, in my opinion, critical. When you talk about availability, there is also something that people don't take into account often, is reachability. Is the problem local? Is the problem global? Is the problem with one ISP or multiple ISP? When we come to the performance aspect, it's very important to differentiate the performance that is impacted by your own doing, the things that you control, versus the third-party tags on your website. Again, this S3 issue that happened this past week, what we discovered is a lot of third-party companies were actually using S3 as a poor man's CDN. And S3 is not a CDN, it's an object storage system. However, a lot of companies were using that as a CDN. So keeping an eye on your third party is extremely important. So yeah, we talked a little bit about this. So separating this availability monitoring from performance monitoring. The availability one, it's something that you need to monitor very frequently. I cannot stress enough the frequency here. Because what you want is, you don't want that much of a gap between different checks when you're doing synthetic monitoring, for example. So that's extremely important at the minute level. But I've seen people do a 15-minute monitoring for their availability. That means that you have to wait 40 minutes to know if you're up or down. That's not acceptable. Again, the origin and the CDN extremely critical, because again, monitoring is about cutting the layers of the onion to find the root cause. I won't bore you with this, but the principle behind this slide is really to make sure that you use the right tool for the right job. Don't get fooled by the single pane of glass that solves all the problem. Unfortunately, you need to use different tools. You need your external monitoring, your APM, your RUM, your network, your internal system level monitoring, etc., etc. And I have yet to find one tool that does everything. So the other thing that is extremely important is when it comes to monitoring and alerting, and to avoid alert fatigue, you have to make sure that whatever you're monitoring is actionable. If it's something that is not actionable, then it shouldn't be captured, because people are receiving that information and they are scratching their head, what am I supposed to do with this? So if you want to reduce the alert fatigue, don't fall into the trap of let me monitor and alert on everything, because if it's not actionable, nobody cares about it. For alerting, so you're monitoring, you're setting the right threshold, but how do you define the threshold? So this is where it's extremely important to define the right baselines. I mean, imagine if we were all sitting here on the conference trying to figure out what's the right temperature for having a fever or not. We have to have some baselines. So if if your website, for example, or your mobile app is subject to variability based on days of the week or hours of the day, you have to take that into account when you're setting up your alerts and your baseline. And so after that, so you've collected the data, you're alerting, you have the right baselines, etc. Then the next thing is really having the right alerting strategy, sending the right information to the right teams. Is it via pager? Is it via email? Is it via a Slack channel, etc.? So there are different alerts. I think they should be used for different kinds of thresholds that are being bypassed. It's very important to stop using basic thresholds. Alert me if something goes above 3 seconds based on an average. I think that's one of the things that causes a lot of false positives and even alert fatigue. So use more advanced alerting systems that use dynamic thresholds or trend detection systems. And you also need a tool that is going to allow you to integrate with your various channels. I have yet to walk into a company these days that is only relying on one alerting system. We walk in, there is usually OpsGenie, there is a Slack channel, some of the alerts go into Splunk, some of the data goes into Datadog, etc., etc. And some customers take it one step further, where some of the alerts go directly and do automation, switch a DNS provider, switch a CDN automatically. And I think that's the future. The future is around automation and taking some of these actions dynamically. So what happens when a failure occurs? And this is the thing that we all as operation folks, as DevOps, as SREs, as technologists, we need to deal with. Failure will happen. It's, again, we get judged by how we deal with it. And really, it comes down to having a playbook and practicing that playbook. That is extremely important. And we've learned that the hard way ourselves. When Dyn was under a DDoS attack, unfortunately, in October, our playbooks were okay. They were not great. But guess what? We went back and refined them. And so now we know how to deal with that. So with that in mind, I would love to pass this to the OpsGenie team, who is going to talk to us about better alerting.
All right, thanks very much, Mehdi. So we're going to turn things over now to Berkay from OpsGenie, who's going to take us through how they've improved alerting standards for IP operations teams. So Berkay, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mehdi. So Mehdi mentioned early on in the presentation about the expectations around customers. There's more and more what we call always-on services that the customers or end users are expecting for services to be always available, performing. And that dynamic had a significant impact on the incident response process. In a traditional enterprise or prior, still in most cases, the incident response is organized around cost effectiveness or the savings and so on, where this demand for services that can never be down or needs to be restored very, very fast, change that, and it's all about time to respond now. That means, as Mehdi mentioned, being ready for those type of incidents which are bound to happen. We cannot prevent them from entirely, even for companies that are solely focusing on that, like AWS. But when that happens, we need to be able to know what we need to do, how do we respond to those alerts, and that's essentially what we are focusing on in OpsGenie. What is our incident posture, or as for customers? How do we respond to these alerts that are generated by the monitoring systems and tools that we developed? As already mentioned, also there are often multiple tools involved. It's not just one tool providing that. Consolidating all those alerts in one place so that we can process them the way we want becomes quite essential. So we are trying to basically make that easier for customers to do. Okay, there you go. So what we focused on is essentially the process, the time between an alert is generated, all the way the resolution of that problem. How do we respond as different teams? If the alert, these alerts have different prior urgencies, some can require someone to be woken up or at least interrupted right away. The others can wait some time, and that making that differentiation and finding the right person to resolve the problem becomes essential. As I mentioned, instead of going through multiple layers of escalation like level 1, level 2, which was a lot more common for always-on services, we want to find the right person to solve the issue, hopefully before it impacts the business, as soon as possible, and that routing that alert to that person, escalating so that you have some backup in the process and it doesn't rely on individuals is vital. OpsGenie focuses on that process and enables the customers to define their incident posture, how each team wants to respond to the incidents that are happening and the alerts coming through, the variety of tools that they use to manage that process. Another aspect of this is to constantly improve. Again, in one of Mehdi's examples, going back to the playbooks and improving that, all that requires some insight into how our teams, in an operational perspective, behaving. What is our response time to critical alerts versus others? How often we escalate. What can we do to reduce the time to respond to particular problems? OpsGenie collects data in every step of the way, from the time the alert is created all the way to resolution, so that the customers can ask these type of questions to the data to determine, where the improvements can come and so on. As part of the solution, as you can imagine, we integrate with tools that generate alerts, including Catchpoint. Our integration framework is one of the key capabilities. We have an API level integration, for example, with Catchpoint, that Catchpoint can automatically create alerts in OpsGenie and route it to the different teams. OpsGenie allows teams to construct the alert message the way that they want, the way that it will make sense to the person receiving the alert, and then once the alert is routed to the right team, the team policies, the escalation policy for that team, the routing rules, on-call schedules, and so on, are used to determine who is the best person, who should be escalated if the first person doesn't respond, and so on. And once we figure out who to notify, we use multiple notification channels to ensure reliability. Push notifications, text messages, phone calls, and a combination of those ensures that the messages or the notifications don't go unnoticed for the alerts that merit those type of attention. So with that, I'll return to Darren.
All right, thanks very much, Berkay. So now we're going to hear from Darren Lord of Overstock, who's going to explain how Overstock has implemented both Catchpoint and OpsGenie to improve its monitoring and alerting processes.
Thanks, guys. One thing I kind of wanted to start out by pointing out was, if you looked at my job description, I am a database administrator, and the reason why I'm pointing that out is I want you guys to know that I am one of those guys that's down in the weeds. I'm the one that's receiving those alerts in the middle of the night, waking up. In fact, I am currently on call, and there is nothing worse than having to wake up to an alert that, as was mentioned, that's not actionable, or something that I don't need to look at right now, or it may end up resolving itself in a few minutes before we know that what's expected. And so I'm going to kind of take a look at that, and we're going to move through that Catchpoint and OpsGenie and how we're using it here at Overstock to try to help in alleviating that alert fatigue that's been talked about. Because it is real, and I know that because I am on call. And we are taking steps over at Overstock to reduce that, and that's going through Catchpoint and OpsGenie. So the first thing I do want to talk about is why we use it, and it is just that, is that we use Catchpoint to help us to reduce that alert fatigue, but more importantly, it's because that's what our business is. You know, in the e-teller world, if we are not having good response times, or if a page is not available, that doesn't convert to sales, and that impacts the bottom line, which ultimately impacts my job. And when we look at Catchpoint, one of the great things and what it tells us is several things. One, we report on how quickly our home page is loading. We report on some of our product pages and how quickly those are coming back to our customers, or if a page is even responding at all. And of course, those are all important to converting those items into sales. And that's why we use it here at Overstock, and operation enjoys that on our end, because we have the ability to now see those things in operations before they become an issue. As was talked about, we have multiple ways of warning us about something that's going on. So you'll see here in the configuration that we had on the page before that was 3 simple panes. One of the things that we monitor everything on our site through Catchpoint. And that, again, is because of the user interface and what we're looking for. Here you'll see here the OpsGenie configuration that we have integrated with Catchpoint. And this is from the Catchpoint perspective. And the thing that I want to point out here is that, as you know, as an on-call engineer or looking at trying to implement a solution, the worst thing about ever looking at implementing a solution is how much time is it going to take me to get what it is that we need. You know, we looked at solutions that we were going to roll our own or whatever the case may be, but there was time invested in that, and as an engineer, I don't want to be spending all of my time setting up these new alert notifications that are going to wake me up in the middle of the night, and I certainly don't want to spend days or even weeks. And so what you see here in the OpsGenie configuration inside of Catchpoint is we simply copied and pasted the template that OpsGenie provided. Again, one of the beautiful things about Catchpoint and OpsGenie is the ability to customize and do the things that you need to match your business needs. We realized that out of the gate, this matched our business needs for helping us to get that information to where it needed to go. This was a 30-second process that we were able to hook up OpsGenie and Catchpoint. You know, I'll say that again, 30 seconds. Like, that really was how long it took. And being an on-call engineer, again, I don't want to be spending all my time configuring these alerts when I should be looking at those alerts and looking at the things that I should be to help me do my job the best. And so with that, I kind of want to go back into talking about how that works into OpsGenie. And with OpsGenie, again, kind of going over why we use it and why we decided on OpsGenie is we did look at several different types of alerting mechanisms. You know, I heard it was mentioned, you know, on the call that the times where everybody would receive an alert or a message, or the days where you would send it to a distribution list, that used to be us. We used to send it to a distribution list. It would hit everybody. We didn't really know who was on call, and the on-call engineer just had to pay attention. We moved to a different model, and we started passing around like a pager or a phone that the on-call engineer would have, but that would mean we'd come into the office, we'd swap that equipment out, they would take it home with them, but there was no real escalation process. And so when we started looking at OpsGenie, we wanted to eliminate a lot of that stuff, and we wanted it to be cross-functional as well among the other teams that we have within our organization. And we chose OpsGenie because they offered all of that. More importantly, one of the things that they offered that we really enjoyed was their flexibility, the ability for us to tie in whatever we needed to, even if it wasn't a part of their integration platform, which they have more than I can mention at this time, but we could have created our own to integrate with that. And as we brought to their attention something that we wanted to alert from, they got right on it, created a base level integration for us to be able to work with Oracle Enterprise Manager. After that, they increased it and they provided greater functionality, and that was one of the things that we were looking at, and OpsGenie provided that. So again, what does it do for us as Overstock, and definitely how does it benefit the business and operations? Well, I enjoy it now because now I don't have to pass around a phone. I have my personal phone. I carry it around when I'm on call. It notifies me that I'm on call, If I have an issue when I'm on call and I need to escalate it to Tier 2, it's as simple as escalating it. If it's an issue that involves another team member, all I have to do is actually assign that alert to another team member. It hits their on-call engineer and they reply to me immediately. I don't have to try to find a phone number or send it to a distribution list and then listen to the crickets and waiting for a response, wondering if they actually received it. I now know through OpsGenie that those things are happening. For Overstock now, and time that in with Catchpoint, it allows us to be able to catch things sooner before they become an issue for our customers. That helps out business because business doesn't hear about it. And that's when you're in the operations world, if the business doesn't know what we're doing and there are no problems, that's exactly how you want it to be. If they're not paying attention to you, you're doing your job. If they are paying attention to you, there is a problem, right? Because they see it impacting the business. And so how does that affect them? Well, now they don't have to worry about it anymore. And as operations, that relieves a lot of pressure because we know that business is only seeing it when it's impacting the business, and now we're catching it all before them. So looking at the integration from OpsGenie to in OpsGenie for the Catchpoint integration, this is a single screen. I just split it up in a side-by-side so you actually scroll down. But I wanted to point this out that that's the beauty of OpsGenie, is the ability to customize even those integrations as they come in. You'll see here I clicked on an advanced integration for OpsGenie, and that's what this configuration is. And the reason is because we removed some of those warnings that were coming in from Catchpoint. Now we put that in there instead of Catchpoint because there may be one day where we want those warnings to hit our on-call engineers, but as of right now, we're just looking at pushing those into those different channels as was talked about before. Our warning levels, they go out into Slack, and then when they become critical, they go out into OpsGenie, which pushes the on-call engineer. But again, on the side of the OpsGenie, it took us 30 seconds to configure. We had everything set up. We enabled the integration. We did that piece. It was 30 seconds. So in total, to configure the Catchpoint with the OpsGenie integration, it took no more than a minute. And now we're hooked up and we're getting those metrics that we need to in Catchpoint, and we're getting the notifications inside of OpsGenie that need to hit those on-call engineers. And that was, again, one of the biggest selling points for those two things, is because now we have that ability to just not have to worry about configuring the system. And again, like I said, that's a big deal when you're going to set up a system. So just to kind of summarize why these are such perfect companions, because we only want alerts when we need them. Catchpoint does a great job in feeding that information to OpsGenie, and OpsGenie does a great job at filtering out that information when we need it. I'm only getting alerts when they're actionable, when I need to look at them. And that's because of Catchpoint and OpsGenie. Catchpoint, again, is looking at those page response times. If they're too slow or they're hitting a certain threshold, then we're able to push that in Slack. It gives us a warning. And now we know that we need to reply to that. If it becomes critical, then we're pushing it into OpsGenie, and now they're getting paged and somebody's taking immediate action. That works great for when we're in the office and things are going to the Slack channel, and now the whole team is looking at those besides just the on-call engineer, so everybody is a part of that. The other thing that I talked about too before is that it's escalation at its best. It's easy for me to escalate a ticket, not just up to my upper level, but again to another team member. Simply assigning those things out and being able to assign an alert that comes to me that I know is maybe an issue from the networking side or from the system side. I'm able to notify them quickly, and then they can get online, and now we start chatting through Slack. Like, that's a big thing for us to be able to collaborate among other teams and do it so quickly when it comes to OpsGenie. The last one is, that's our job in operations, is that we're improving the end user experience. The way that happens is by continuing to make sure that our site is up, that it's responsive, that it's doing what it's needing to do, so that as our customers visit the site, they're getting the best experience possible. I mean, you've all been there before. You click on a product page. If that product page doesn't load within, a half a second to a second, you're immediately clicking back and you go into the next item. That's a sale that's lost, and in Overstock, that's important to us. We want a good user experience. We care about our customers, both internally and externally, and we want everybody to have a pleasant experience. And Catchpoint and OpsGenie has helped us take care of both our external and our internal customers. Those internal customers being us on the operations team. So we appreciate the effort that Catchpoint and OpsGenie have done here at Overstock in helping us to avoid that alert fatigue.
All right, thanks very much, Darren. So now let's delve into some of the questions that were posed during the talk, and I'd like to remind anyone else who has a question to enter it into the questions window before we wrap up. So let's start with one that was posed to Mehdi during his portion. What are some of the examples of actionable versus non-actionable data?
Sure. So my favorite one is monitoring from the wireless networks, for example, because these are things that you have zero control over. It's good to know. It's good to know that your pages are slow from AT&T or Verizon at 10 o'clock in the morning in New York City, but is it actionable? Absolutely not. There is nothing we can do about it unless somebody has a magic trick in their backpack and they can put a cell tower in the middle of the city. So those are unactionable items. With the another example is when you look at the web page that has maybe 300-400 objects on it loading, maybe 300 out of those 400 objects, maybe 300 of them or 200 of them are coming from third parties, right? So it's completely unnecessary to alert Darren, for example, to tell him that the Facebook tag is having a problem. There is nothing he can do about it. So using tools that can, for example, separate the noise from the signal is extremely important. So again, actionable means that you get the information, you can take an action on it, and you can resolve that problem. If you're getting information that contains stuff that there is nothing you can do about it, might as well throw it. Because the last thing you want is keep sending alerts to your people, and at some point they're going to tune off. They're going to stop looking. They're going to stop caring. And it happened to me. But that the day something really big happens, something that is in your realm of responsibility, somebody's not going to say, well, I just thought it was the monitoring tool that was too noisy, or I just ignore those things at 2 o'clock, and that's what you want to avoid.
All right, thanks, Mehdi. So the next question is for Berkay. The question is, how does OpsGenie prioritize the severity and urgency of alerts?
Oh, yeah, thanks. That is a pretty vital one. So the OpsGenie provides means to process the alerts coming in, as Darren showed a bit in the UI, to use filters to basically differentiate alerts based on the content of the alert coming in, and then you can use tags to prioritize, but mostly differentiate first. You can use tags in more than one dimension. You can tag them as urgent, or assign the customer name if that is the case. You know, maybe gold SLA versus silver, depending on what service level the particular business unit or customer might be using. But that can all be done using what we call either an integration layer or using the policies we have based on the alert content. And once the alert is categorized this way, throughout the product, those tags can be used to process the alert differently. The teams can have different escalation processes for different alerts based on that tag. So if an alert, say we added the urgent or P1 type tag to an alert, a team can have, for P1 alerts, this is my escalation process, which is much more aggressive than the incident response process for other alerts. Users can have different notification rules, as we refer to them. So for P1 alerts, maybe I want to use all the notification methods, push notifications, calls, and SMS. If I still don't see the alert, it will go back and repeat until I see the alert. But for alerts that are maybe not P1, I only want to get a push notification or an email. Or a team can say, well, these alerts that are not critical, categorized as critical or not prioritized, just route them to a particular room in your Slack or HipChat or so on. But the ones that are P1, make sure to notify them. Our approach is basically to provide the tools to define the prioritization, which can happen by through the rules that you define in the integration, or you can even have multiple integrations, and Catchpoint can point to different integrations for different alerts, like the urgent alerts, and the others can go to a different configuration so that you can route them differently. But once that categorization happens throughout the product, you can use them, including the reporting, as I mentioned. What is my team response time to the alerts that are tagged as high priority or P1? Is a question you can ask in the reporting layer as well.
All right, thanks very much, Berkay. Our next question seems to be for Darren as it relates to Overstock's usage. So the question is, how much faster is your time to discovery and recovery now that both of these tools are in place?
Well, the discovery, I'll talk about that just briefly. We have a bunch of monitors in our operations, of course, that show us all the metrics and everything that's happening within our department. And previously, this is going years back, but the way that we would identify those issues is that we have a tracking monitor that shows us when we have a dip in revenue, and that dip in revenue was related to customers not being able to access the site. And so the users were the ones that were reporting back those items to us when they were having an issue, but we were just seeing it through this graph of revenue, which of course impacted business. With that, we've reduced both of those two things that you mentioned, in that now the user doesn't have to feel that experience, and what we're doing is we're resolving them before they actually become problems and affect the end user. So we're taking a look at the system before that's even happening. So it's great we reduced it, because now we're catching it before the users even see it, and we're able to resolve those before it becomes an impact on them.
All right, thanks a lot. And then looks like we have one more question. This one seems to be can be for both Mehdi and Berkay. So it's, what measures do Catchpoint and OpsGenie take to reduce false alerts? Why don't we start with Mehdi on this one?
Sure. So there are many things that we do. So I'll start with at the system level on our end, where our agents are running all the synthetic tests. We have created an infrastructure where there is separation of church and state. In our case, the actual agent from the scheduling system, and they live in different data centers. So by not being able to, if an agent cannot talk to the scheduling system, it doesn't run tests, and so that's a way for us to reduce the noise that is usually driven by poor network connectivity between the nodes and the scheduling system. So that's one of the things we do. Another thing that we do is looking at holistically at all the tests running in one particular node, and being able to understand if a node is, for example, throwing alerts just for one customer, for all customers. Is it something local, or is it something that maybe all those websites have like a tag going to Facebook, for example, or Twitter, and they're having an issue? So there is also those kind of techniques that we employ. And then on the other side of the house, we provide customers with different alerting mechanisms, right? Anywhere from being able to set, obviously, the basic thresholds, which I think are the ones that cause a lot of false positives and noise, because it's based on averages, right? And that's what people are used to. So you get like 3 bad measurements, and that screws up everything. Then we have like dynamic thresholds, which are a little bit more appropriate for the nature of what we are monitoring on behalf of our customers. So that's the ability to say, I want to look at response time, but I want to use the 75th percentile. I want to look at it by node. I want to look at it by test run, etc. So we give customers a lot of knobs to be able to dial things down, but you also need to practice, right? Don't go and set up the alerts and start flooding OpsGenie or your email system. You need to test those things. So we give customers a sandbox capability to test those things. And finally, we're playing a lot with more advanced algorithms. So we've been playing with this thing that we call trend shift in Catchpoint, where basically it's the ability to separate anomalies, which is just like a blip, versus a trend. It's a shift in the trend direction, either upward or downward. And so we've been playing a lot with that, and a lot of other companies have done some great work in this space, like Twitter, Facebook, Google, etc. They've been playing a lot on this kind of advanced alerting and advanced algorithms. So these are some of the things that we are doing at Catchpoint, and we will keep working on that.
All right, thanks, Mehdi. So why don't we send that same question over to Berkay. So what measures does OpsGenie take to reduce false alerts for its users?
Right. So obviously, we get involved after the alert is created, so we can't prevent the alert from being generated. However, the information that you provide with an alert that will enable a user to quickly assess, what that alert is about, and what's the level of response and it requires. So what we do is that the mechanism that we have in OpsGenie allows executing automated responses as well as user-driven responses. For example, when an alert comes in and it says, the problem XYZ, that alert can be assigned a specific set of actions that would allow the recipient, the responder to the alert, to execute directly from the mobile phone or web UI, whatever they're using, to collect additional information. We have what we call an integration server, a lightweight utility that the customers can install in their environment, and when the user gets the alert, they can, for example, run traceroute to see what is going on, or even check whether the problem is still there, right? Like ping the host if the host was down, and so on, whatever might make sense. So OpsGenie enables building further information into the alert to provide context and determine whether this is a false alert or not. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect is, again, related to tagging. Our customers often use some kind of tag to specify whether that alert was a real one or a false one by tagging the alert. And since we have extensive search capability, when an alert comes in, one of the things that the user can do is search whether there were other alerts with on the same topic or same error message and so on. And if there are old alerts that are tagged as false or not, that can serve the customers as a pointer to, is this a noise, or is this something that happened? And the reverse also is important, like when an alert is essential, or it's a real problem and has information on the alert that about what the alert was about and what the resolution process were, that it can be tagged as a knowledge base or something like that, would also serve the user as a resource to determine how to respond to that alert, maybe give a leg up in assessing the importance or the severity of the issue. So we can't prevent the alerts from generating by enabling the users to add information and categorize accordingly. The users can make use of that information to determine whether it's false or not and respond accordingly.
All right, thanks, Berkay. So that seems to be it for the questions. So I'd like to once again extend a huge thank you to Mehdi, Berkay, Darren, and everyone on the OpsGenie and Overstock teams who's helped us put this on today. I apologize for some of the technical difficulties that we encountered. Hopefully it kind of drove home the point of the need for a good monitoring and alerting strategy. And with that in mind, if you'd like to see Catchpoint in action, you can do so. We have a live demo happening on Thursday of this week, March 9th. You can visit the URL below to register for that live demo and see all the different capabilities that Catchpoint has to offer. So once again, I'd like to thank all of our panelists and everyone who is in attendance, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.